name of our mothers, our fathers, all our ancestors, I'd like to greet you all today. How's everyone doing?
Blessed.
All right. I want to thank Dr. Evans for inviting me to this session, and I also want to thank Dr. Evans for coming to Atlanta and being in Atlanta. And perhaps we wouldn't have this. And I'm pleased to be on this panel. Each and every panelist is special to me. Kurt Young, I knew as a graduate student here at Clark Atlanta University. He contacted me about his research on Pan-Africanism, and we've worked together on a lot of projects since then. I remember he did a lot of student activism here when he was at Clark Atlanta. Christy Garrison was actually my graduate assistant when I was a professor here at Clark Atlanta University. I had a year appointment here. Beverly Guy Sheftall taught at Emory, and I could never get in her class. It seems I've been learning from her ever since. And I took note of many things she said today. And Mills, Dr. Mills is probably figuring out, how does this brother know me? He doesn't remember when he was Dean of Arts and Sciences at Morehouse. My son was a student at Morehouse, and he had a dispute with a professor, and I came up there to support my son. And I must say that he was, he not only handled the issue with my son, but he also mentored my son. And so I appreciate him for the guidance he provided my son at that particular time. There are people in the audience who are important to me too. I just, this week, submitted my manuscript to a publisher, and much of the help came from Cayenne Shabazz from the Woodruff Library. I'm also on his graduate committee, so we're gonna make it easy for the brother to get out. And I wouldn't have gone to graduate school had I not seen the mentorship, because I dropped out of school, and I was very active in the movement. I'm still active in the movement, but I saw the scholar activist tradition of Mac Jones and Dr. Boone, my brother Jabril, and the political science department here. Mac Jones probably thinks he owes me some money, because every time I see him in the audience, I have to give him some acknowledgement. And also, when I was a graduate student at Emory, I took historical methods from Alexa Henderson, and that provided the basis of my work as a historian. She really got me on the right foot in the right direction. She's never forgiven me for not staying in Clark Atlanta, though. So maybe she'll forgive me after those kind words. Says, you went to that white school. But here we are. W.B. Du Bois. You know, I always feel when I come to this campus, I'm coming to sacred ground. And one of the reasons this is sacred ground is W.B. Du Bois. We're right near Dean Sage Hall, where W.B. Du Bois was a professor. And so, you know, you have to tell students that. Last year, 2 years ago, I did a talk on Du Bois, and we centered it here at Clark Atlanta, or AU, in the tradition of history, just thinking about what Du Bois's contribution is. The Philadelphia Negro is the first sociological study. I agree with Dr. Mills. That's the first social. You can't, you know, it just shows where we are in the academy today if people aren't centering or starting the discussion of sociology with W.B. Du Bois. It's the first sociological study. He conducted the study when he was doing field work in Philadelphia. He had a little research job at Penn, and it wasn't published till he was here at Atlanta University, 31 years old. This is a period of time, and this period of time when Du Bois publishes the Philadelphia Negro and comes here to Atlanta University, it's a period of transition for him. When we think about Du Bois, you think about transition though. You know, he might have been consistent or on a gender question, but you know, he kind of moves from sort of an integrationist position to being challenging the NAACP, because he's talking about we're a nation within a nation, to Pan-Africanism and even communism, leaving the United States and being buried in Ghana, rejecting his U.S. citizenship, which they didn't mention when they gave him a stamp. Right, Dr. Hewitt? They didn't mention that part. But he's even in this brief moment we're looking at, he's going through transition. If we can remember, When Washington first gives his Atlanta exposition speech, Du Bois applauds the speech. That's in 1895. He was one of the first people to come out and talk about how this speech gives a potential to resolve the race question in the United States. But then by 1903, right, he's a critic of the position. So Du Bois himself is going through transition. That's one of the things, like Malcolm X, we can appreciate about Du Bois is the ability to reflect and then transform their political positions during a particular period of time. In that Philadelphia Negro, Du Bois also gives us an indication of where he's going with the concept of the talented temp when he talks about this submerged temp. And of course, Du Bois is always challenging us around what is the role of the black intelligentsia and what is our role. And this is a question I think we should raise here today in this particular session. Finally, and Stephanie mentioned that I work with the National Council of Black Studies. And when I think about the National Council of Black Studies, when I think about NCOPES, when I think about other black professional organizations who hold sessions every year, we have to always honor Du Bois because of the Atlanta University conferences, right, on Negro problems. Those are the first Black Studies conferences before we even had something called Black or Africana Studies, right? And when you look at those conferences, they kind of embody what I think of Du Bois as a quintessential or the laying the template for other what we call scholar activists today. And what I mean by that, you have some, and when I talk to my students about scholar activism, I say there's two types of scholar activism, right? There are people who, through their intellectual work, raise questions that talk about or deal with questions of social change, right? Raise the important issues of the day. Beverly Guy-Shaftar, I always think, is one of those scholar activists because she raises pertinent questions on gender and race that make us kind of rethink things. And it kind of pushes you not to just think about it, but damn, I got to change how I behave. So that's a scholar activist in one sense. And you have others who are scholars like Du Bois, who actually was active in the NAACP, period, right? Actually organized the Pan-African Congresses. Actually, you know, was in the Communist Party and made statements against the war and demonstrated against the war, right? So, who I guess during the 1906 race riot had his little shotgun on the porch. So Du Bois was a man of action also. And so he bridges both of those things. But when we look at those conferences, they began to research and look at not only problems in the black community, but they also looked at solutions. One of my favorite articles that Du Bois produced from those conferences was some efforts by Negroes for their own betterment. That's right. And when you look at those particular studies, Du Bois is looking primarily at Atlanta and looking at what black folks were doing in Atlanta with their own resources to try to uplift themselves, if you will. That was the terminology that was used at that particular time. What black people were doing in terms of sharing their resources to bury each other, to take care of each other when they were sick, to start enterprises in our community. And when we look at issues of our situation economically today, maybe we need to look at that article again in terms of some efforts black people did at that particular time. So we always have to honor Du Bois for those things, for what he presented as a scholar and what he presented as a scholar activist. I'll shut up and I think I'll be within my time.
What?